Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Politics and Pints here on Jackman Radio. We're so happy you decided to join us. Today we're really excited. We're sitting down with presidential candidate, former Congressman and Vice Admiral of the Navy, Joe Sestak. Joe, how you doing?
It's great to be aboard.
Yeah, thanks for coming and sitting down with us. This is great.
Well, thanks. It's wonderful to have both of you. Thanks.
Yeah, so you're running for president.
Yep.
You got into the race in June, you were saying, a little late. How's it going so far?
Well, I might be late, but my ideas are pretty timely. So it's going well. Don't get me wrong, it's got a challenge. The established media said, whoa, they're late. Wait a minute, I'm in at the same time Bill Clinton got in years ago. So we kind of work on that. 9th in the polls, tied in Iowa. We stayed there for about 3 weeks. No, I'm sorry, it was 3 months in an Econo Lodge. Right. We actually tried to fill most of those holes of those 18,000 precinct captains you got to have for the caucuses, where they trade votes as you go around. But now I'm in New Hampshire, independent-minded. You can walk in, be an independent Republican, say, I'm going to vote Democrat, and walk out. This one's made for me because I represent nearly 2-to-1 Republican district. Second Democrat since the Civil War. F from the NRA, 100% neighbor elbow choice, and yet I got reelected by 20 points. I didn't spend a penny on a campaign ad. So I think this is really where I'm going to try to make sure, my foot walks along the road as I'm doing 105 miles across New Hampshire today.
Right, so that's kind of a out of the Sestak playbook from Pennsylvania. I know when you ran for office out there, you walked across the state, and you're doing it here. How's the walk going? Tell us about your walk across New Hampshire.
It's going well, and I first of all, I do it because I never forgot, as we learned in my daughter the book To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus had said to Scout, the young girl in the book, who relayed the story later on, you can't know a man till you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. In a sense, that's why you'll see pictures of me with assault weapons on my website, where I went out, even as an admiral with my troops, to make sure as we boarded ships, I still experienced what they went through looking for contraband. Is it going well? It is. Look, I started a mental health facility in Brattleboro, which is on the other side of the Navy Seabees Bridge there. Then I crossed on over. But first I wanted to be there because they deal with vets and first responders, among others that have PTSD and other challenges from the traumatic work at times they do. Then I continued, and I met here in New Hampshire the guy who has the largest Caterpillar lab in America. My gosh, you walk in and here's somebody started 4 years old, and he's taken this into explaining to the world, Harvard University and others, the vitality that we have because of making sure that our climate change won't destroy an ecological system and even such a base part of the food chain. And just one more if you don't mind, because we're still in. Went to a prison. I do that all the time as a congressman, to go visit my vets. You have one of the most pragmatic, progressive Cheshire County prisons here of anywhere. You talk to the inmates, and don't get me wrong, they got to be dealt with toughly, they are, but they're dressed as Mr. and Ms. on both sides. And a focus upon re-entering them into society has been great. Yeah, I've learned, but I've also been able to meet great people like that. And I think it stands pretty well for America. As challenging times are, there's still great people out there doing good things.
Doing a walk like that definitely brings attention to larger issues. And it's kind of, were you inspired at all by Granny D's walk across the country for campaign finance reform that she did when she was nearly 90 years old?
So much so that I just did a video on her, Granny D.
Oh. Yeah.
Here's
to Granny D.
Yeah, Granny D.
Granny D. So, drink one. And while we're clinking the glass here, I need to say that Admiral Joe Sestak is the first presidential candidate on this show to drink a beer with us.
Oh, thank you.
This is number 5, and this is historic stuff here, guys.
He just went from 9th in the polls in New Hampshire to 1st.
Yeah, just on that alone. He's working hard for the Irish vote, and he's winning it drink by drink.
But if I could take offline just for a moment, I'm here in a small business where a young woman established this place against all the odds. And my hat's out to her because we're only creating 18 new small businesses for every 10,000 working Americans today, because it's a lot more tough to handle the regulatory cost and to get the startup money than when we used to have 36 small businesses spring up for every 10,000. We got to do much better than that.
Yeah, I mean, creating a business now, there's red tape, there's regulation, there's taxes, there's so much BS you have to worry about. It's turning a lot of us off to wanting to do anything like that. And our dad was a small business owner. He was a car salesman. He owned wood shops. He was a car salesman. He was a contractor. You could kind of do all that stuff more back in the day, and for our generation now, there's not a lot of incentive.
No, and why is this happening? And you talked about Granny D. Her quote says, we have to get the money, which is the greed that we have in America, out of the halls of government. And to show you with small businesses, I became vice chairman of the Small Business Committee down in Washington, D.C. as a freshman. It normally takes you 10 to 12 years to be a vice chairman. I thought they wanted to show they had a sense of humor. No. Nobody goes to small business because there's no PAC money.
Yeah, that's true.
And yet there is over half of Americans work and live. What are we doing down there?
Right.
Yeah, Main Street versus Wall Street. That's
that's
really the heartbeat of America. And what do you think about the idea that $15 an hour would hurt small businesses?
No,
if we compelled them to pay their staff that.
I'll tell you what the exact right amount is today, $14. How do I know that? We analyzed it. As I told somebody who was walking with me today, I'm a great Napoleonic fan, where he once said, don't tell my wife, make sure she doesn't see this. If I were to be in love, I'd analyze it bit by bit because you can't ask how or why enough. So what we did, when I lost, I didn't go for a lobbying job like 450 congressmen and senators. I went to teach and work on nonprofits. And as I was teaching, we analyzed what's the right minimum wage. So we studied all those coterminous counties. Like in New Jersey, they raised the minimum wage. And we looked at the counties over here that didn't in Pennsylvania. And we found out that they did not, as well as scores and scores of others, lose any jobs as long as you didn't raise it above the average hourly wage. So you could go up to $14 today, which is the average hourly wage, half the average, and you don't lose a job. Above that, you begin to lose it. So that's why I just said, let's analyze it, look at it, and show by facts, who does facts today, and show that you go to 14, and then you can stick up as inflation rises, as well, increase to $15.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, a lot of people are struggling, and the argument is, oh, well, those jobs are for high school kids and they're for younger people. Well, there's a lot of single parents and people even people who have college degrees who are making in that ballpark. So it's like,
when you look at where really works in fast
people are trying
foods,
to survive. They have second jobs. I mean, it's crazy.
You hit it right on the head. When you really analyze who's taking these fast food jobs and all, they're single moms.
It's not
and
just
others
young
like that.
kids.
There's
Yeah,
not kids.
yeah.
You got to get out. Here's the other issue. I tell people that you take New Hampshire. Our employment rate here in New Hampshire would be 7.6% if you included the 5.1% of those who have left the workforce because they don't have the skills with technology changing so rapidly in order to get a job. And that's why we need a program that I call Training for a Lifetime, to where in the military, when you lose your job because the F-15 goes out of business, we don't kick you out like when the coal mine closes as we work ourselves towards handling climate change. Nah. We send you to the Air Force Community College, the largest community college in the nation, to learn about the F-22. And so that's what we have to do. Those are the Trump and the Clinton supporters as we try to unite this country, that we need to focus on those 65% of American workers, that we spend less than any developed nation on labor force training.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you brought up money in politics, because I've been reading a lot about Jimmy Carter lately. Our dear Jimmy just turned 95. And I'm sure you've met him numerous times, or you've met him before.
I wish I had. Fellow Navy.
Right.
Nuclear submariner.
Navy guy, and just a class act, and kind of a rare thing in American politics to have reached the absolute pinnacle of it, becoming president, and not really being as dirty and corrupt as other people we've seen reach that office. So Jimmy Carter said about money in politics, the U.S. is an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. And Citizens United violates the essence of what made America a great country in its political system. And this speaks to what you decided to do after you were out of Congress. Limitless flows of campaign cash favor those already in office. The same thing applies to governors and senators and Congress members. So now we just seen a complete subversion of our political system as a payoff to major contributors who want and expect sometimes favors for themselves after they get out of office. So you didn't go that route, you went a different route.
No.
But you mentioned so many of your former colleagues, they're in there and they're wheeling and dealing, and they have their future in mind. What kind of plum job am I going to get after
And this is why the biggest deficit we have in America today is not the debt, it's the trust deficit. We have 450 congressmen and senators taking a lobbying job in the last 20 years. The median level of income has flatlined for working families during that time, but their revenue has gone up 400%. Look, I got offered those jobs.
Of course you did.
One was a 7-figure job. I was an admiral in the Navy when I said, why so much? An admiral and it really was Navy, an admiral and a congressman.
Yeah.
And I told my wife, she said, jokingly, I think, are you sure?
Yeah, you sure about that, Joe?
Let me tell you, that's the horror. That's why I submitted the first piece of legislation after Citizens United was
Yeah.
submitted to say this must end.
And that's what Carter was referencing, Citizens United. It's completely legalized bribery, and it's subverted democracy and the will of the people, because what is someone who has $10 in their bank account going to do against someone who's got 10 million, who
got
can
it.
lobby members of Congress? So, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. So when you were in Congress for 2 terms, just your day-to-day, how much time did you have to dedicate to fundraising and dealing with donors and people that want something out of you? I mean, that's probably a good part of your job, I'm assuming.
It is a good part, but I ensured I didn't, I went to the hearings. Usually what I did is wait until the evenings and took it out of personal time. 2 things. As I used to tell people, I followed the sun over to Hawaii. And I made sure when the last scene was done, I went over then and then made the calls when I was in Washington, D.C., not when I was in the district. Because in the district, we kept our office open 7 days a week to 9 o'clock every night, because I entered it after having come home from the war and my daughter's brain cancer being taken care of. I entered a 3rd war, the Great Recession, which, to your point, those politicians who took those lobbying jobs were the ones also who voted over time and across the spectrum to tear down a wall where we definitely need a wall to keep greed out and accountability in. When they tore that inaptly named Wall Street Wall down, they destroyed my constituency livelihoods. We had to keep it open those times to save over 800 homes from foreclosures, because politicians were influenced. In the final study by the commission on what caused the Great Recession, they said it was the lack of political willpower to face up to the financial power of the lobbyists of the financial industry.
So after being a congressman and you were in that just behemoth system of corruption and bribery all around you, what could we do? Like, what could actually happen aside from repealing Citizens United? What steps?
Which with this Constitution, with this Supreme Court, is going to be tough. Here's what needs to be done. We need a president who actually people feel they can trust once more, even when they disagree well with him, because they know he will ultimately be always accountable to people, above party, above self, above any special interest. That ends the revolving door. Said that will not stand. But also, they know, because he has demonstrated it by turning down those things. It's not for one's word, it's for one's actual proven deed, that he'll be like Harry Truman and Jimmy Carter, as Harry Truman drove in his own car away from the White House.
Right.
Look, we have no choice. Because unless we unite this America again, there's no way we're going to meet the defining challenges of our time. We want another president who's going to do executive orders, and the next one throws them out, and money is the root. I mean, if I might, we have a challenge here in New Hampshire. You rate 3rd or 5th, depending upon which study you look at, in how much opioid challenges per capita you have people involved. And yet we're 48th down here on being able to have facilities to support this. But yet, you step back, was it only pharma? No, you hit it on the head. The number 2 official in 2010 in the Justice Department walked down the hallway to the Drug Enforcement Agency and told them to stop all prosecutions and referrals for prosecutions, all investigations, all referrals, prosecutions of the illegal pill mills, like in West Virginia, 500 people in a town, they're shipping them pharma, a million pills, and then that gentleman went off to become a revolving door lobbyist.
Right, revolving door.
165,000 people have died since that day happened.
They're treating them like drug dealers now. Finally, like a drug dealer down on the corners being.
There should be
treated
criminal offenses about this.
Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family.
Sackler family.
Sackler family. They're now looking at people who are at that level actually prosecuting them and holding them accountable for lying about the effects of the drugs, how dangerous they actually were, how addictive.
Yeah.
So,
but what happens to the politicians that open the door?
Yeah, nothing's happening to
nothing.
them.
It's just a revolving door.
Nor for those politicians, Democrat and Republican alike, who voted for that tragic
both,
war in Iraq.
Yeah, it's both
2
parties.
decades of unaccountable consequences. Even the invasion by Turkey into Syria is a result of that vote. And that unaccountable leadership is responsible for the lack of trust today.
So, could you lump Joe Biden into that?
He voted for that war,
for it.
and not one politician, including Mr. Biden, has ever accounted for themselves for the 2 decades of unaccountable consequences.
Yeah, and I'm friends with Dennis Kucinich, and he said, I was not fooled by George Bush about Iraq. You have Hillary Clinton and the 08 batch who ran, Edwards, Clinton, Biden all said, we were fooled by George Bush. And Dennis Kucinich, say what you will about him, he said, hello, I voted against the war. I was a sitting member of Congress. I led the resistance against the Iraq war. I wasn't fooled by him.
See, gets to second reason why I'm running. The first one has to do, if we don't have somebody to unite this nation, we're not going to move forward. We're only sideways. Number two, we have to have somebody who's commander-in-chief who actually understands that militaries can stop problems. They can never fix a problem. And if you're going to have somebody who's going to ever use our military, they better understand how it will end before you decide to begin. They didn't understand. Joe Biden or others, what's a Shia and a Sunni?
Yeah.
They unleashed ISIS.
Right.
And then I'm not accountable. And so therefore Americans have a loss of trust or faith in our engagement in the world when we need to be engaged in the world more than ever.
never
for
ending.
climate change alone.
Never ending and perpetual warfare. I mean, Cheney said we're going to be greeted as liberators. You actually butted heads with Donald Rumsfeld about troop drawdown in Iraq, right? Was that one of the issues?
The issue that I kind of
maybe
butted
among
heads
others?
with the establishment, you might say, is defense reform. In 2005, what I honestly do believe, by the way, I did believe that we should have a date certain. When I got to Congress and submitted a bill, said within a year.
Exit date, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
we must be out of Iraq. Why a year did I pick? Because I studied and had the Army come over and studied Somalia. Do you remember Black Hawk Down?
Sure, that was early 90s.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah,
Well, remember, we had about 15,000 troops there. It took them 6 months to get out safely. So I had them come, because retreating, coming back, is a lot harder to do because they know which way you're coming out
Right.
than it is going in and they don't know which way you're coming. So it took about a year to get us out safely, but also defense reform. We have a military today where the commander of the Pacific has said, we now no longer command the Western Pacific. The first loss of command of the seas by the U.S. Navy since World War II. Why? Because back in 2005, when I ran the Navy's $350 billion warfare 5-year program, I said, stop building so many ships. It's not about structure. It's not about 54 submarines. It's about 35. And take that money, part of it, not all of it, you even need, and put it into cyberspace, cyber warfare.
Yep.
Remember how we took down the centrifuges of Iran for 2 years just by a cyberspace thing?
Yeah.
And we're building a ship when I'd rather be able to take down its radar just by fairly inexpensive smart youth going zim. And so we are building,
Without
instead
boots
of
on
a
the
force
ground.
capability, we're building force structure. We're building like the battleships, we're not going to aircraft carriers. Now we need to go from aircraft carriers to cyberspace warfare. You're right.
Without putting boots on the ground.
Without putting boots on the ground.
Do you see what's been going on with Iran as similar to like the Gulf of Tonkin that really escalated the Vietnam War in 1964? All this posturing, putting our drones and maybe our ships closer and closer,
Basically goading them
to their sovereign territory, and just being like, we want war.
This is the first one who's ever drawn that analogy, and yes, as I think about it right now.
As a Navy guy,
yes.
I mean, you know way
And
more
here's
about
why.
it than.
Let me tell you, here's what's so important about what you say. I told you militaries don't fix problems, we stop them. We fixed Iran. Within 60 days, it would have had 2 nuclear devices, and we kicked it out by convening the world, which is our greatest strength, including strange bedfellows like China and Russia, and said, hey, economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions, can't get rid of that stuff. They did. And then we broke our word. And now we think we're going to use our military to stop. And here's the issue. We can't survive if it's a sustained strike in the Persian Gulf. They have 19 mini submarines. We can't find them. The sonar doesn't work in reverberation in the Persian Gulf. There's only 2 places that when I had my aircraft carrier battle, we can operate. 2 places. We go back and forth, 300 days out,
Just patrolling
just
and checking
launching
all the-
aircraft. We go into the wind this way, we come back. We go into the wind this way because it's got the depth of water. So we'll get the heck out of Dodge, go outside the Gulf, and begin our strikes if we have to from a distance. And they'll lay thousands of mines by fishing vessels and close off 22% of the world's oil supply. In the meantime, they have hundreds of missiles. This is not Iraq.
Oh,
This
no,
is
no,
a
this will make
sophisticated-
Iraq
this
look
is
like
a real-
Disneyland.
Yeah.
This will make it look like a cakewalk in Iraq. And so they'll rain hundreds of missiles down that can reach Israel and our bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and others. Maybe after 3 weeks to 2 months, we might be able to destroy the facility that's under 300 feet of rock, and then they can rebuild in 4 years. What are we doing? We fixed the problem.
Yeah, so it's a diplomatic solution here. It's not going to be military, and I mean the Iranian Guard there. I mean that's a formidable. Iran's like a fortress.
It is.
It's a country of how many people?
Like, over 80 million?
80 million.
80
people
million,
or
and it's
something?
4 times the size
Yeah.
of Iraq.
Yeah, and they're pretty modernized, and it would be ridiculous.
And I'll tell you though, we should be engaging positively with them. When I was in the Arabian Persian Gulf,
Yeah.
their Navy, they're professional Navy, not the Iranian Guard. When they come near you, they're one of the most professional around. Coming down your starboard side at 3,000 yards. Roger that. It's the Iranian Guard. That's the nut's a little loose there. They'll come steaming towards you. I had to keep a helicopter up. That was my plane guard to kind of, with the air from the blades, to wash them away and ready to take them down. So there is a stable, thoughtful type of society in there, and we found that out when we engaged on them. Are they doing some mischief? Darn right they are.
Yeah.
But you know what? We should slap down on that part by engaging them where we need. There's some assistance.
It doesn't
here.
mean all-out warfare. Yeah, that's
No.
crazy.
Look,
That's
they don't
insane.
like
It's
they don't
insanity.
like they don't like ISIS and Al Qaeda. If we're really going to resolve Afghanistan, you can't just do it with the Afghan government. You can't just do it with the Taliban. The Taliban are fueled by Pakistan. The government is fueled by India, and Pakistan and India don't like each other. They like the fighting. China's coming through its Belt and Road Initiative. Iran doesn't like Al Qaeda and ISIS, but it wants that road. You got to get them all together, and so they all own the suitcase of peace afterwards.
Yeah.
Or what are you going to do? You're going to leave? You're going to walk away like the president did with the Kurds? You're a mess.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue. I mean, it's
And who understands it? But that's my challenge: is to tell people that, look, what happens over there is going to harm us at home. You better have somebody who understands this world, not just a short-term service, but understands
long
it.
term.
So,
yeah.
I mean, regardless of how this primary goes, if you're not the nominee or you're on the ticket, I mean, I really feel like your voice belongs in this conversation and your experience. And so from 94...
Well, I appreciate it, but I want to make sure this beer stays in the conversation.
This
So,
beer is definitely in the
Absolutely.
conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So from 94 to 97, you were director for defense policy on the National Security Council staff for Clinton. What was that like? What were your days like with that?
was
with
fabulous.
Bill Clinton? Did you say, "Hey Joe, how are we looking out there in the high seas? how are things looking out there, Admiral? How we doing?
Well,
How's Big Willie's Navy?"
I'll tell you something. It was probably, I would walk out every night, and it were late nights,
Yeah.
11 p.m., and I would just walk out, and my office overlooked the driveway to the West Wing.
Yeah.
I'd walk across that little driveway, and I went in, kept the Oval Office open. I'd look in and just look at the Oval Office and said, what an honor.
Yeah.
I never
Cool.
lost the honor of serving the presidency of the United States over Bill Clinton. But I can't ever forget at times where Air Force One called. And there was an aircraft carrier where had its aircraft starting to track this Chinese submarine. That was, you talk about Tonkin and
Gulf of
Falls,
Tonkin, yeah.
and it was tracking close to the water of China that out to 12 miles, it belongs to a country. And all of a sudden, China went on alert and said, launch aircraft to take down the others. And of course, we're interpreting all this, NSA, and the call came in, and from the National Security Advisor, who was with President Clinton, the Air Force One says, we just got called, what's going on here? And here, all of a sudden, it's just Joe Sestak talking to National Security Advisor to the President saying, sir, here's what's happening. We always track submarines, we find them there. They got to be told, stop it and pull it back. Because the bureaucracy just went into automatic. We got a submarine, and they forgot to think, oh my gosh, I'm getting close to inland waterways. And China says, that's an aircraft carrier with its planes coming in after you're going to sink my submarines. Your point about Tonkin and not understanding these intricacies of the world is something.
And you were the guy. You were the guy that
It
had
was-
overseeing over 10,000 troops in a big fleet with the George Washington.
That's all.
Or that was 02 when you did the George Washington.
Yep.
Took command of
So I
that.
think
So
it was
did you get to hang out down in the Peoc? You go down there, or where?
way down below? How do you know about that?
Oh, I know about the Peoc.
Oh my gosh, that's way down there.
Presidential Emergency Operations Center.
Oh my gosh, well, you
We've
guys
never
are
been
really,
there. We'd like to go have a beer down there.
Could you get us down there?
How do you really? Well, you'll know about it. But I'll tell you something. You brought up Jimmy Carter. I'll tell you
Yeah.
another time. I saw the war plans come on over, as Jimmy Carter was. We weren't thinking about. He was in North Korea. They had
Yeah.
pulled plutonium out of the water to keep it which President Clinton said it's a red line if you do this. When America knew a president meant his word, and they started pulling it out. And they came over and said, okay, on Tuesday we're deploying these carriers, we're deploying these Marines, we're deploying this, because he had told it's an act of war if you do that. And I'm sitting there in that small situation room. Wow, this is serious stuff. You better know
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Right, a red line's
and then
been
Jimmy
drawn.
Carter called up, and said,
Jimmy Carter.
said, hey, I got it. They're going to put it on back in. He happened to be by serendipity. We talk about a red line. I advocated as a one-star admiral out there in those battle groups that we should have a red line to Iran.
Yeah.
For that exact reason.
Absolutely. Well,
A red phone, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
the phone. Yeah, not just
phone.
Moscow.
Red
We need one to
phone.
Iran. We need one to Pyongyang.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we had it with Moscow.
Yeah, we
Why
could-
not
right,
with Iran?
right. We gotta
and
talk
so
to
that
these
little
people.
Iranian boat that's all of a sudden caused this thing to escalate, you can say, hey, they pull them back.
Right. And Jimmy Carter, why he's still respected in sub-segments of the DPRK, the government, he negotiated with the Kim Il-sung, the grandfather. So he offered Trump, I'll try to do Jimmy Carter. President Trump, I'll negotiate with the North Koreans. I know them. Send me over there. I don't care that I'm 95-year-old peanut farmer, I think he should go to North Korea. Jimmy Carter,
That would be
It would
great.
be perfect.
I think it would be great.
we've got a
yeah.
lot to learn from Jimmy Carter.
We do. He would look, part of this is, he kind of learned in the Navy, piss poor planning means piss poor execution. That man just didn't go in with an idea like this president has, said, I'm just going to sit down and go. He would go in with a thought, what could be done, and in a very non-threatening way, just kind of laid it out.
Right.
And that's what he did, and that's why he's still successful to serve this country, still serving this country after he left office.
Yeah, his post-presidency is would
Awesome.
argue one of the most popular, and he still has a lot of goodwill. So if you were president or you're in the next administration, would you advise continuing talking to DPRK and meeting face-to-face? I mean, what would your posture be with
First
with,
off,
Chairman Kim?
when the president said he was going to start meeting with him, at first I was in favor of it.
Yeah.
I do think engagement matters. I think we should be doing it with Iran.
Yeah.
And after that accord, we should have continued to see where else we could bring it about. That's what we did with the Soviet Union. We had 25 nuclear arms control agreements, people tend to forget, to keep that genie in the bottle after it.
For a long time, yeah.
Yeah. And so my thing is that, yes, I would, but I do it differently. Again, America's greatest strength is not by going it alone, it's by bringing together the allies and friends of the world, and even those who are strange bedfellows, Russia, China, and bringing in Japan, bringing in South Korea, and bringing them together, but also laying out to him that, look, I know that this president that just left office has given you credibility by meeting with you, getting nothing for it, telling us he was going to get something for it, but now you continue to nuclear making capability, you do ballistic missiles, and you've gotten cred on the international stage where more people are likely not to enforce sanctions if we want to put that back in the box. So that holds no more. And the proof of that is not that I'm saying it. I've got all these nations here saying it. There's no more cred here. We want something. If we're going to relieve economic sanctions, and I don't mind going down to a peace treaty, but it's going to have to be a quid pro quo because there's no other ways to do it. Trust but verify.
Yeah.
And that's what the president didn't do. He had no plan. He thought it was a deal of some sort.
This is a great reality TV moment, Joe. Believe me, it is. It's incredible stuff.
So you wouldn't bring a bag of McDonald's and Dennis Rodman with you? I mean, come on, those are
I like
marketing
that.
chips.
Hey, if it means peace, I mean,
Yeah.
if it brings us peace.
Look, I told Chairman Kim I can get a basketball signed by LeBron James. He'll even personalize it if you get rid of your nukes. What do you think?
I think you're great.
Well, bring me to North Korea. I'll come with you.
He'll dress as Trump.
Yeah,
he'll
Do
do
you
it
play
for cheaper.
basketball?
I can shoot hoops, man. Yeah,
He's got the
I'm
free
a hockey player, but I can shoot hoops. I feel that way too about North Korea. We should continue to talk to them. We should continue talking to Putin in Russia. I mean, what do you think Putin's after? Why is he so obsessed with? It's perceived as the internal affairs of our country and our elections. I mean, what's Putin's end game? I mean, how would you?
I think there's 3 points here. One is what he sees is, which is true, that when the Soviet Union ended, the United States expanded eastward. We took all those Eastern European countries that were in the Warsaw Pact and now part of NATO.
Yep.
And we had agreements with the republics, Azerbaijan, and you know what I mean, and said, hey, we're now working with you here. And he saw this encroachment around him. What we didn't do is work well with Yeltsin beforehand, which was a difficult problem because he had his own issues.
You want to talk
all
about
right?
beer?
He likes vodka.
Yeah, but Mr. Clinton was moving down that road, and somehow this guy came in and said, I'm going to stop that. But here's what happened. We now don't recognize and approach Putin the right. What he's trying to do is reassert the grand visions of the Soviet Union had, except under Russia. But he only has power to do mischief in 2 areas. The near abroad, they call it, Ukraine, commandeering its warships, commandeering its lands. He doesn't have the might to walk into Western Europe. No, we shouldn't look at it anymore. What he really is a gas station. That's where all the money comes from.
Siberian gas station.
You hit it on the head. they want to go deeper and drill more. They're running out of gas elsewhere.
Right.
We should be denying them technology to develop the eastern Siberian fields and say, Putin, look, let's get back on the road of good behavior here.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to slap it down. Here it is what it is. We have walked away from leadership of the rules-based world order, where there were consequences for misbehavior. And as a result of not doing it, you see the crown prince of Saudi Arabia high-fiving Putin, who then feels empowered to murder an American resident in his embassy because he fears no consequences from it.
And there wasn't any.
And
No
there
one's
wasn't,
done
nor was
anything.
there really any for when they commandeered those warships from Ukraine, Putin.
Yep.
And that's what we have lost by coming back
Yeah.
because people felt that tragic misadventure in Iraq is how we engage. No, we engage with other allies in a peaceful way, but a very firm, hurtful
American
way through
soft
diplomacy
power,
and
too.
economic. You hit
Yeah.
it on it.
I think we got time for one or two more. I wanted to ask you, do you have any cool stories about running against Arlen Specter? He was a bit of a specter, you know.
Yeah, he was actually.
You know, he went from Republican to Democrat to Republican back to Democrat, and you know,
And then he was a comedian in his last throes. Did you know that? He did stand-up comedy after he was in Congress?
I didn't know he did it afterwards, but they have a comedy club down there, and they'd ask us all to come in, and I know he went into it. And
the biggest joke he ever told was the magic bullet theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was his
Let's be
best
honest
joke.
about that.
You know, the biggest, probably the story, it's probably not that funny, but, you know, I got there and we were having a debate before the League of Women Voters. And I'm sitting there and there's someone sitting in the front row, like it was a closed room, it wasn't large, it wasn't a big official debate, it was kind of of the moment. And there was, of the moment in a week preparation, there's this woman sitting in front of me and she looked almost homeless. And so the debate began and he made his very fine statement. But I'd always wondered why I saw his son and others kind of looking at this woman there in front of me. And remember, I headed the Navy's Strategic Anti-Terrorism Unit, so intelligence was always important to me that I'm always observing
He's always
things.
reading the room.
Yeah. So,
Looking for exits.
so all of a sudden, I go to make my opening comments. And this woman, phone rings. And she talks louder than me. So nothing I said in my opening comments could be heard. I thought, that's pretty clever. You
She's
know?
a plant.
It was a plant. It's not funny. It was just humorous that,
Jeez.
boy, those Republicans are pretty good in this race. You know what I mean?
what they
They
were doing.
outsmarted me, you know? It's not funny, but I thought,
Well,
I should have thought through this one.
Now, totally switching gears, the mid-'90s when Steven Seagal was still relevant and like the biggest action star, what are your thoughts on Under Siege? The movie Under Siege.
I don't think I saw it.
Steven Seagal plays a Navy cook on a big aircraft carrier.
Well, I didn't see
And he
it.
was Special Forces, then he became a Navy cook.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
Casey
tell you this,
Ryback.
if he was a cook.
Gary Busey dresses as a woman in the movie. This
Yeah.
is before
So-
Are
Caleb.
you guys serious? How
I'm
have I
dead-
seen this?
Joe, we got to
incredible.
do a reboot, and I want Joe Sestak in the reboot of Under Siege. Joe Sestak.
I feel
comes
under
on
siege
board.
right now. You know what I mean?
All right, when you get some downtime.
And he was a cook?
Yeah, well,
I'm
it's
just a cook.
I'm just a cook.
He's
Yeah.
actually like
But
a-
he was
like-
undercover.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
oh,
really
tot-
like special forces. Like they're like Casey Ryback's on it. The whole aircraft carrier will be safe.
Yeah.
But they actually had an aircraft carrier that
They had permission to film
they had
on.
permissions to film on for them. You haven't seen Under Siege?
No.
Oh
but
my
you know,
God,
you got to
you wanna be
remember
president,
something.
you haven't seen Under
Well, here's
Siege?
probably why. I was underway.
Okay.
So that's
all
probably why. But here, if he was a cook and he didn't cook that well,
Yeah.
I kind of understand.
Yeah,
He probably
he
was
was-
a pretty good cover.
Yeah, no, it was a great
All
cover,
right.
but it's a classic.
So you want me to talk? I thought you were going to ask me a Hunt for Red October or something.
Or Das Boot.
Yeah, or Das
Das
Boot.
Boot? Yeah.
Or K9, the Widowmaker.
I don't remember that one. Das
But that was a
Boot.
Russian. That was Russian.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the Russians. All right, so we're running out of time here. Admiral, I just want you to make your pitch. Why should you be the next president of the United States?
Because this nation most wants, and I think it most needs, someone who people actually trust again, even when they disagree. Just like they did for John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan, to where they would say, gosh, that guy's always going to be accountable to me, and has demonstrated it. Whether it was above party, that I care for people, or whether it's above myself, turning down those positions, or whether it's above any special interest, myself, party, and all. But you know what? This country also needs somebody to convene this world. Think of the issues we just spoke about. Who understands the world anymore? Who understands the military that thinks we fix everything? You know? No. We need someone who convene our nations that we support around the world together again. Within a liberal, authoritarian, might makes right, China rising, climate change, 85% of the damage comes from abroad. And yet Saudi Arabia is actually going to use as much energy to power its air conditioning in a decade as it exports in oil today. And we're back here talking up and raising our hands on a debate stage when it says, okay, we want Medicare for all. Who does? And no, that's not the right question. Is how are you going to get there? When this nation was unable in the last do anything in the last 2 or 3 years of our very fine president President Obama, but executive orders. If we don't have somebody like they did in my 2-to-1 Republican district, they can trust. We aren't going to make it. I honestly believe that. There's mighty fine candidates out there, but our Hobson's choice is to heal our country's soul with a president that can actually make that happen. I expect to be yelled at. I expect all that. Just like I was in my junior population. At the end of the day, I expect to earn their respect because ultimately it's about them and they're going to know it. It's why I'm walking across New Hampshire.
Awesome.
That's why.
Well, Admiral, this was a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So there you have it,
Thank
folks.
you. Good luck.
Admiral Joe Sestak, he's running for president. He's walking across New Hampshire. This is another great episode of Politics and Pints on Jackman Radio, filmed right here in Peterborough, New Hampshire at Post and Dean Brewing. If you want to support us, please click subscribe, like us on Facebook, like us on Twitter. We're on Instagram too. And also we're on Patreon at patreon.com/JackmanRadio. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.